Ladies and gentlemen, let's Red Gaming Zedicom video. We have news that the PlayStation 4 is rumoured to be receiving a, quote, massive performance boost at some point in the not too distant future. Now, I've done this as an article as well because not only am I linking to a couple of sources, but I've also talked about some of the stuff that may be pertinent to this before, so we're just going to jump right in. This began with a Twitter exchange between Tidux, that's T-I-D-U-X, Thuway, and a couple of other industry insiders. It also included some ex-IGN editors as well, and it seems to revolve around Ice Team. So we'll go more into that in just a moment. But Tidux said on Twitter, "Who knew that Ice could perform? Future improvements are completely bananas." Then Ashan Rasheed, perhaps better known as Thuway, added, "If the numbers you are giving me are true, then it really is game over for the Xbox One." He then added to this that he's not referring to sales figures or how well the consoles do, more in terms of performance. But then he pointed out, "I find it hard to swallow," obviously referring to the numbers that are being pointed towards him, "but if it is true, the Xbox One to PS4 port difference will grow much larger if the devs choose to make the PS4 version shine." So, immediately, alarm bells must ring, because we can't take things like this as gospel. We can't say it's actually 100% definitely true. But there are a couple of points to this. The first is, I covered this back in March, I think, and this was from Court, who actually, he is from Ice Team, and I've linked this in my article, but he basically said on Twitter, "Finally wrote that ASM, that's ASM, I was looking forward to. Early results, PS4 surface tiling/detiling on the CPU is between 10 to 100 times faster. Sim-delicious." There's another possibility. It could well be further optimizations towards the PS4's API as a whole. It could maybe be a reduction in the reserve for the PS4's memory allocation, or maybe CPU. Obviously, there's a lot of memory reserves specifically just for the CPU at the moment. Developers have discussed that the PS4's CPU is a bottleneck. I've got links to the sources of that in the article. There's another possibility. The CPU and GPU are going to be upclocked, not overclocked, which a lot of people are saying, which isn't the correct term. Now, normally, let's say the GPU of a processor is, running at 1000 megahertz and you overclock it to 1100. That's overclocking. But in this case, for the consoles, both the AMD Jaguar and the GCN, the GPU in this case, which is based on the GCN architecture, are good actually at higher clock speeds. But the reason they're lower clocked, they're actually downclocked, underclocked, is for heat. Now with the Xbox One, it's running its AMD Jaguar, which is of course 8 cores at 1750 MHz or 1.75 GHz if you prefer. The rumours state that the PS4's CPU is 1600 MHz. So theoretically, the PS4 CPU could receive an upclock, and the GPU as well could also receive an upclock. It's running at 800, whereas the Xbox One's is running at 853. However, the PS4's does have significantly more shaders. So it's a bit of a toss-up, because despite the fact there's a lot more shaders in the PS4, the Xbox One has the ESRAM and the data move engines. So, in other words, upclocking the Xbox One and upclocking the PS4 could theoretically equal to about the same amount of extra heat being produced by the SoC. Remember, both the CPU and the GPU are part of an APU, which is on the Xbox One SoC, or the PS4 SoC, but it all comes down to the cooling system. So one theory that's being bandied about right now is we're going to be seeing an upclock for the consoles. Possibly. The Jaguar is technically good up to about 2 GHz, but shrug. The other possibility, as I said, is that it could be the GPU, which is going to be receiving overclock. So, for example, right now it's 1.840 flops. If it was overclocked to, say, just under well, just about 850 megahertz, it would be just under 2 T-flops of computing power. It equals to about 1.95 or 1.97, I don't remember the exact math. On the other hand, if Sony managed, very unlikely, I mean incredibly unlikely, to get it to 900 megahertz, you'd be looking at about 2.07 T-flops of computing power. However, there are some other possibilities as well. My gut feeling is it's most likely something to do with optimizations either via the SDK, drivers, or software, if this is true. So what I personally think it is most likely better use of the OS, maybe tweaks on the reserve. It could also be, as I've mentioned earlier from Court, something to do with the surface tiling and detiling, because CPU performance is definitely being a bit of an issue. So the X1, of course, is having its own share of improvements in terms of, well, performance. One of the obvious ones is it's going to be getting DX12. It's also, of course, going to be freeing up some of the GPU reserve for Connect. Supposedly, it will be down to developers to enforce this, in other words, how they want to run it, but that's somewhat up in the air at the moment. There are some other things for the Xbox One as well, and it's natural that SDKs, APIs, and other parts of a console will improve, as well as, of course, the big one, programmer's knowledge. Right? You could be the best, you'd have the best system in the world. The PS4 could have 50 billion T-flops of computing power. Completely unrealistic and silly, but, you know, whatever. And a really, really crappy developer could get something out of it that looks like Pong. On the other hand, someone who's really talented can get a lot more, or someone who's a lot more knowledgeable who optimizes really well can get a lot more out of the system. And this is evident from Naughty Dog when they were pointing out how difficult it actually was to for the transition to the PS4 after being so used to the SPUs from the PlayStation 3 cell processor. And it's not because the PS4 is weaker, it's just because they actually optimized the code so well for the SPUs. It just kept crashing, basically, when they moved it to a completely different architecture. I have covered that on the channel already if you would like more information. It was just a day or two ago. But in this case, as I said, do take these as like not definite. It's not been confirmed by Sony by any stretch of the imagination, but there are whispers of it. And Court, as I mentioned, has pointed out the surface tiling and detiling thing before. As I've mentioned, I've already linked that regarding, well, all of this stuff that we mentioned in the article, so you'll find that in the video description. There are a couple of other possibilities regarding this, but they go really into the optimizations of the GCN architecture as a whole. And it's worth noting that this isn't going to be a situation where, you know, there's a hidden GPU or something ridiculous inside the PS4. That's not what's happening here. At most crazy, we'll be seeing an op clock. Second most crazy, we'll be seeing a redistribution of, say, the memory allocation inside the PS4. Third and most likely scenario, if this is true, we'll be seeing instead optimizations for the API, SDKs, and a few other bits and pieces regarding this. But as I said, a lot of this is pure supposition and theory at the moment. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Do let me know your thoughts and opinions on this. You can reach me in a couple of different ways. You could stalk me via Facebook, which would be the better way. It's facebook.com/redgamingtech, or you can leave a comment in the video, and I'd encourage you to do so anyway, just to give your thoughts and opinions. You can also do it on Twitter. That's RGT Crimson Rain, that's RAYNE. Or you could also... Actually, no, that's about it. Anyway, on a serious note, guys, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.